The gurus were social engineers. And I say they were social engineers because they recognized their social society, they recognized their social audience, they recognized their backgrounds, they recognized their languages, they recognized who they are as a person on a fundamental human level. And they use their background to teach them about the truth of life. That was my question for the longest. I remember going to sleep, on my bed, thinking like, what's the purpose of life? Why am I even here? What is this? And I would look at the stars and I would think, what is the purpose of all this universe, this creation, this world? And I felt like if I was not able to answer these questions, I will lose the little bit of trust I have within the Sikh religion. To have a dialogue, you kind of need a few things in place. You need trust, you need someone who is educated, you need cultural understandings, you need a lot of things to have a dialogue that works, to have that magic click. You know what I mean? It was quite unexpected. It was just out of the blue. He just walks. We were walking to the Gurdwara, and he walks in front of me, and he's like, "Supreet Singh, you'll never know the beauty, the bravery, and the high character of a woman until you reach Chitrapakyan. Chitrapakyan is all about how to navigate that world that's shaping its way around you, navigating that hostile world, because the world will have, multiple flavors in it. So it might be kind to you, it might be nice to you, but there might be aspects of the world that might want to kill you, they might want to hurt you, they might want to destroy you. Um, Especially if you start building a name for yourself. And Chitrapakyan is all about that world that wants to destroy you, that world that wants to kill you, that world that wants to deceive you. And it's all about these political, moral teachings that will be prescribed in a story. So Chitrapakyan is a collection of 405 stories. So it's a voluminous composition of collection of 405 stories, which are sewn together with an overarching story. So Chitrapakyan literally means a story, a play, a deception. And within there, there's quite explicit stories in the sense that they're very illustrative of sexual scenes, adultery, exploitation, the killing of children. Like there's a lot of horrible and horrible things that people have done that are written in these stories. And so that's where the controversy stems from. Like people are like, wait, how could the guru have been engaging in these type of stories? Like so that's kind of where again, because people separate the two, right? They put the guru in one box, real life in another box. They don't put it together. Within the Indic understanding, there's four different parts of the human autonomy with the soul. Those four things are the Mann, the Buddh, the Chit, and the Ahankar. And they kind of go from subtle to more and more physical. So how a thought becomes a physical manifestation. The Mann is just this void of thoughts that have no purpose. They're just thoughts. The Chit, it can zoom into a thought, pick it up, and start to analyze it. The Buddhi is then what makes a decision of that thought. And then the last bit is the Hankar, which is the physical manifestation of that original thought. If it passes through the Buddhi, the thought passes through the Buddhi, then that thought will manifest into a physical action and it will become the real world, right?
Okay.
If it doesn't, the Buddhi does not allow it through, the intellect does not allow it through, then a thought will just remain a thought. It will go back down to the void where it came from, and no one will ever know it happened. When we don't have enough strength and courage to fight off our inner demons. For example, let's say someone is addicted to watching pornography. They're addicted to watching pornography. Now it's become a addiction. At first, it probably started off as a thought, right? In their mind, maybe someone put it in their mind, like, "Hey, dude, check this out," whatever, right? As kids, we go through school and we hear all these different things, and we're interested, we're curious, we look it up, and we get enticed, and now it's become a habit. Now it's become a habit. Well, what do I do? Because now when my willpower is this small, and the habit is this strong, right?
Mm.
The human brain, the human body, the human autonomy, how does that work? The spiritual autonomy, how does it work? That gate is grown stronger through the guru's wisdom. That gate is grown stronger through willpower. And how's willpower made? Through fighting off your your bad habits. The next day comes, right? The habit is calling out. The habit is pushing you. It's those thoughts. They're now becoming intrusive thoughts. They're flowing through those gates of buddhi. They're no longer asking for your permission now because it's become a habit. Your willpower is too strong, too small. They're flowing through. But in that moment, if you can just get up as much as you can, put that thought back in its place. One day, you put that thought back in its place. Second day, you get stronger. Then you put it back on the third place, you get even stronger. Fourth day, you get in 40 days, you'll be completely brand new. You'll be so strong that that thing can never stand up again. You self-reflect. You look through all your trauma, you look through all your hurt, you look through all your pains, you look through all your suffering. You have to examine each and everything that you have inside your baggage, the baggage that we carry, the memory code. You go through all that human memory code, and you search and you search and you search and you comb and you comb and you comb, and then you heal and you heal and you heal. When you do all of that process, the water will naturally start coming out from the front of the hose. And when it starts coming out from the front of the hose, life will change. Guru Gobind Singh Ji describes himself as a 9-year-old. And he says that one day my dad gave me a teaching. My dad came to me, Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji came to me and gave me a teaching at the age of 9. He said that my dad told me that you're meant to have a loving relationship with your wife. You're meant to have love between you and your wife, and you're meant to increase that love every single day. Let it multiply every single day. This is who you're meant to be. This is the husband you're meant to be, a loving one. But never, even in your dreams, my son, enter the bed of another woman. Even in your dreams. It's a taboo subject for us to even go into that route. And the Guru is talking about it. Imagine that culture 300 years ago that he's talking about it. That's crazy, Maybe there are more progressive than we are. You are meant to become a king. You're meant to become a king. You're meant to rule the world. The Gurbani always says that the spiritual people rule the world. The word of the Khalsa, like we say, Raj ka Khalsa, the Khalsa will rule the world. The word Khalsa means pure. The pure ones will rule the world. How do we become pure? It's a step-by-step process. We were very naive, and you will see many characters in Charitrophakhyan are shown to be naive. You learn how to make a decision. You learn all these different things of life, the good and the bad. You learn all these different things. You learn how humans have interacted in the past so that you can make an educated decision of the future. So after all those stories, Charitrophakhyan ends with a very famous composition that we all read by Guru Gobind Singh Ji, which is called Kabio Baj Benti Chaupai Hamri Karo Hat Racha Puran Hoy. And this very famous composition, and it's a composition on protection. It's a composition on asking for protection from the divine, that please protect me with your own hands. May my mind always be at your feet. So it's crazy that after all these stories, so dark, so explicit, after going through all of that, a Sikh comes down to the Guru's charan and says, Maharaj, I am nothing. I cannot fight these things that are going to happen all around me. You're the only one that can protect me. You're the only one that can save me.
Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's cinematic. Before we dive into the podcast, I just want to take the time to ask you to please like and subscribe to this channel. This will help us grow the podcast, invite more guests on, and share their wisdom as we grow Illuminating Dialogues. I also want to share with you that I'm offering one-to-one coaching. This is a space where we navigate together to clarify your vision, align yourself to your values, and achieve transformation. If you feel called for that, you can book a session with me on my website, Jhoty.com. There should be some testimonials as well there. The links are in the description below, and also there's a link for you to join our WhatsApp community as well, where you can discuss these episodes. So I hope you enjoy the rest of the podcast ahead. Hello everybody, and welcome back to Illuminating Dialogues number 41, where I really have the pleasure to sit down and talk with Bhai Supreet Singh today. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. How are you doing, G? And where in the world are you coming from?
Doing very well, Virgi. I am coming from Texas, United States of America.
Awesome. And that's like almost not really the other side of the world, but quite a long distance from Scotland. So, for the viewers who are not familiar with Bhai Supreet Singh, I'll do a quick bio. So, Bhai Supreet Singh is the first American raised parcharic speaker and educator, currently demystifying the Charitrophakhyan in an English analysis series to explore Guru Gobind Singh Ji's composition in a modern light. So, I really, as I've come across YouTube and exploring the like we were just talking about before this conversation, like delving deeper, um, I was so interested to explore this worldly topics, and I would love to dive into this in Illuminating Dialogue series. So far, we've been looking at different paths, also very spiritual material, and the material we cover today is more unworldly. So I'd love to share with the viewers the context of this and also how it could help us navigate in our life, especially in today's day and age. So before we get into Guru Gobind Singh's thinking behind this, perhaps how we can build a relationship with our spouses and our community, and how we can balance these qualities of righteousness, courage, bravery with like deception or trickery, and sharpen our intellect. Before we delve into all of that, my first question to you is, what lights you up?
Okay, what lights me up? I would say it's definitely Parchaar in general, and for anyone who doesn't know, Parchaar is a field of education where a educator, he or she goes out into the world and spreads, the message of Sikhi in any way possible. And from its very inception, the inception of Prachar was started by Guru Nanak Dev Ji himself, the first guru, who, traveled far and wide. Out of all the gurus, they're the one that traveled the most. They traveled all the way in our recorded history, all the way to the Middle East. They traveled all the way to Tibet. They went to Sri Lanka. Um, they went to all these different places, all by foot, and they went spreading the truth, and in layman terms, that's what they did. Um, and from Guru Nanak Dev Ji onwards, each guru was essentially a pracharak, but they not only did prachar themselves, they did not only educate others themselves, but they set up a team of pracharaks. So the third guru, Guru Amar Das Ji, actually set up 22 pracharaks, which were essentially within India, was in India at that time. This is prior to 1947, the creation of India. But before 1947, that general Indic region had about 22 states, you can say, right? Princely states, kingdoms. Each kingdom, each pracharak was given to a kingdom, and their duties were to spread the truth, in discussion, in conversation, in dialogues, not in the manner of like what you might see today of a religious missionary going out.
Mm,
It's not in that same light at all. It would be more from the perspective of challenging beliefs that are filled with hypocrisy, challenging traditions that are no longer serving the human need, and inspiring people to find their light. And that's essentially what a pracharak does. And for me, that's what really lights up my world is this role of prachar.
amazing. Um, Amazingly explained. I don't think I've ever heard what Parchaar means. I've heard the term a lot, but I actually never knew about the history. So thank you for sharing this. And I think in some of my journey, when I went to Greece, I realized that Aristotle also had like this the dialogue series, and also recently I understood that they was like bungas in Punjab, and the bungas wasn't just for wrestling or um, yeah, like a military action, but they were also for katha, parchar, dialogue, perhaps even like healthy debates. And I do some coaching as well. And sitting with somebody and understanding with their belief system, I find that to be so interesting because we all have different perspectives of the world. And yeah, I find that really cool.
Absolutely. I think dialogue has always been a very essential part of the Sikh ecosystem, you
Mm.
know. Starting with Guru Nanak Dev Ji, we have a very famous composition. It's quite a lengthy one. It's called Sid Ghost. And the title Ghost literally means discussion or debate.
Oh.
Um, and in that composition, Guru Nanak Dev Ji is having a discussion or even a debate with people from a different sect or a different group or a different philosophy, you know, and he's challenging them. You know, he's talking with them, and that continues all the way to Guru Gobind Singh Ji when he has a library of his own in Anandpur Sahib for 24, 25 years. Guru Gobind Singh Ji had curated a environment where philosophers, critical thinkers, spiritual people were all coming underneath one roof, and they were all discussing different philosophies. You
Mm.
had the works of Rumi, Jalal al-Din Rumi from the Sufi tradition. His very famous text is hailed as the Farsi Quran, called the Masnavi, was being translated in the Guru's library. And then there was discussions happening with it. This okay, what does this, for example, this line here it says this. How do we interpret that today? How do we move forward? Like these different philosophical debates were happening, and the gurus were supervising this. You know,
Mm.
so this is in many ways this is something we're not alien to. Unfortunately, I think the last 50, 60 years, we have kind of shied away from this tradition
Mm.
and dive a little bit into that later. But you did mention the Bungas.
Yes.
In Harmandir Sahib, Harmandir Sahib, the Golden Temple, was surrounded by these bunge, basically different institutions,
Mm.
institutional buildings. And like you said, there were physical activities that were taught there. There was medicine that was taught there. There was academic endeavors as well that were taking place in these bunge. One very famous one was called Gyaniya the Bunga, the Bunga of Gyanis. Basically, these Gyani is like, for example, today we have someone who does their doctorate, we call them doctor. We put R in front of them, right? In the same way, a person who would join their studies, their academic studies within the Sikh tradition, they will be called a Gyani or a Bhai.
Mm.
Um, how I have the title Bhai Supreet Singh, you know, and Gyani was another synonymous title, which indicated that this person has endeavored into years of academic research and education.
Amazing. And it's amazing that they had this infrastructure. And we've been going through the Ayurveda understanding in this podcast, and also how during the colonial period, perhaps how these yeah, were kind of dismantled, and then how they actually affected the culture and education. So it's really interesting to hear about how our education system infrastructure was, and perhaps how we can tap into that again. Um, and I would love to ask you about your own journey, about how did you start to come into, I guess, Sikhi, but then how were you also then drawn into becoming a speaker, educator, and then doing this Parchaar on the Charitrophakhyan?
Ah, yeah, very good question. I have, you know, being born in a Sikh family, my grandparents, and as far as our written kind of family history goes, for a few generations we had Amritaris in our families, both maternal and paternal sides. Um, but during my immediate parents' generation, and their brothers and sisters, they all kind of because of the situation of 1947 just passed. Everyone's finding their roots again. My parents had well, their parents had migrated from what was now called Pakistan to
Mm.
India. So there was a big shift in financial and economical stability in the family, and therefore Amrit was not it wasn't passed on to my parents' generation because they were more busy, I'm assuming, trying to work and get on their feet, established. Once my parents migrated to the US, um, they gave me the best of Sikh education as they could. They both were working parents. So as the time they had, they did try to invest and gave me the letters of Gurumukhi. They try to teach me that. They try to give me a few sakhiyan, as much as a parent can. And nothing really. I think I wasn't really able to grasp um, the Sikh identity from what they were teaching. I think it was just because there was a cultural barrier as well, growing up in the States. I thought very differently than my parents, who were Punjabi migrants. So it was just there was a cultural barrier. Eventually, when I made my way to college, to university. I was in my first year, and usually this is a time period, usually like latter part of your teenagers growing into your adult phase, where someone starts to think about what's the purpose of life.
Mm.
That was my question for the longest. I remember going to sleep, on my bed, thinking like, what's the purpose of life? Why am I even here? What is this? And I remember I started thinking about these questions around sixth grade, sixth, seventh grade. I would just lay on my bed at nighttime. I had like these glow in the dark stars on the roof of my room. And I would look at the stars and I would think, what is the purpose of all this universe, this creation, this world, like, and my parents, they couldn't really I couldn't really have that dialogue with them. And we're talking about dialogues just a little bit earlier. To have a dialogue, you kind of need a few things in place. You need trust, you need someone who is educated, you need cultural understandings. You need a lot of things to have a dialogue that works, to have that magic click. You know what I mean? Because there was a lack between me and my parents, culturally, edu from the educational point of view too. I was getting a different education than they did. There was just too much of a difference where my questions went over their heads.
Ah.
It was just like, why do you want to learn about what the purpose of life is? Do your work, go to school. That's enough, right? Keep Their whole mentality was keep spirituality, keep all these things at an arm's distance. Like
Mm.
because it's gonna prohibit you from working hard. Like in their mind, working hard was the goal of life because they just migrated. They've seen their parents migrate from Pakistan. They migrated from India. Their whole mentality is shaped with this idea: work hard, get money, be successful. That's the goal of life. And that's not their fault. That was their goal. Like there was no, the, you know, the- for that period, the Punjabi community went to almost the stage of hunter gatherers, right? Like
Yeah.
we were no longer worrying about the books on our table. We were worrying about food on our table. And so my questions were just on a different dimension. It is so eventually growing up, went to college. In university, these questions reached a peak. I reached
Mm.
a peak with questions. And I felt like if I was not able to answer these questions, I will lose the little bit of trust I have within the Sikh religion.
Mm.
And I reached that stage because growing up, I was the only Sikh in every single schooling I went to: elementary, which we will call primary, right? In middle school, high school, which is called secondary, I believe in UK.
Mm.
All the way to college, I never seen another Sardar. I was the only Sardar. I was the only person with a Jura on my head throughout all my schooling. And so you're trying to fit in, and you can't really fit in if you're the only person that looks different. And on top of that, you had these questions looming around you that no one's able to answer. So it's like you can't really connect to that identity that you have on your face. You're connecting with an identity that's on other people's faces because you understand that. You don't understand this. No one tells you about it. No one's talking your language about it. But that image that people are carrying is socially, culturally accepted. And everyone understands that, but no one understands this. So it was a moment of just being confused and not having my identity. So when I was in university, one day, I was going through a bit of a hard time with my friends. I came home and being upset, and I had this habit as a kid. Whenever I was upset, my mom, she gave me a radio, or a cassette player, when I was a kid. And there was a cassette in there of Bhagat Kabir Ji and Freed Ji Slokes. So Gurbani was in there. It was Kirtan. And I used to play that every time I had nightmares as a kid, and growing up, that became my habit, my go-to. If I'm upset, I'm going through a hard time in life, my go-to was go and find Kirtan, right? And so around that time, I would just go on YouTube and type in Kirtan, right? And what's funny is that day I went to look for Kirtan, by Jagraj Singh, he just had started making his videos. Basically, Sikh, he just had started at that time. And his video, I saw a video on the side, and I saw a sick man. He kind of resembled, a youthful image, right? And which was new to me because all the Sikhs I did see at the Gurdwara were either, they were kids or they were white bearded uncles, right? I could never find someone in between, in states at that time, living in New York. Um, and I could not find anyone in between. I could not find someone that was similar to my age, or a little bit older. So seeing this image was like, wow, okay, that's pretty interesting. Let's see what this is about. Clicked on it, and he's talking in English. He's talking in English. Furthermore, he's talking from a cultural background that I can relate to. His words, his sentence, his vocabulary, his grammar, everything was how I would think and how I would speak. And that connection was made, over just the virtual web. And listening to him talk about Sikhi, I was blown away, you know. And these could have been the same things possibly that I've probably heard of my whole life. But because they were told to me in a different language, from a different cultural background, that was not my cultural background or my identity or my language that I spoke, it just went over my head. I was never able to connect to it. But because this man, he was looking like me, he was talking like me, he was thinking like me, the words hit home. And before you knew it, I was binge watching all of his videos. I watched every single one of his videos, and I literally couldn't let go. It was like I found this new part of life that got unlocked. The air tasted different. The sun looked different. The water, everything started to look different. Like nothing was the same ever again for me. And from that day forward, Virji, then it really is the truth. Nothing was ever the same ever again. I still think back to myself, as a 21-year-old or 20, how old I was, I don't know, probably 18, 19 actually. And thinking back to those years and thinking like, wow, like that person who I was, I'm still that person, but it's not the same anymore. Something has changed dramatically, drastically. And I owe that all to Sikhi and the teachings that I was taught, over the web. So I just, there was one moment that really changed my life where Bhai Jugraj Singh would say that, if you have a kada on your hand and you have a khanda in your room, you should wake up in the early mornings and meditate. And that part was so new to me, meditation. I was like, wait, meditation? Like, I thought that's what Buddhists do. Like, we do the same thing? Like, that's so weird. Like, how come I never seen anyone do that? And I was like, okay, you know what? Like, let me try this out. If he's saying that this is, and that was his style of Parchaar, right? Like that was his thing. He has such a big academic background from Oxford, being a graduate in philosophy. He had all that, but when he came in front of the camera, he talked about Sikh. He talked pure experience. He didn't talk about something he heard, or he talked about something he felt. And
Mm.
that experience that he was sharing over the camera really, like, like I had a belief in it. I was like, okay, if this guy is feeling all these different things by meditation, I want to try it too. So one day in the morning I woke up, and I had put an alarm on my iPhone. I think that time the iPhone 5G, 5 was out, or whatever it was. And I had put an alarm on. I woke up and at 3:30, and I just sat there and just said Vaheguru, a few times. I didn't know anything else. I didn't know how else to do it. I just sat down, just said Vaheguru a few times. And you know, the first morning I woke up, there wasn't a profound experience that took place, but there was something that I felt that told me to try it one more time. It was like it, it was like the way I describe it, it's like if you're in a dark room,
Mm.
you kind of found the walls in the room, and you're like, okay, you know what? There's something here. I can't see what it is, but there's definitely something here, and I said to try it again. Next morning, I woke up again. I tried it. And this time it felt like going from the walls, I found my way to a door, a closed door, you know. The door was closed, but hey, at least I found the door. Now my brain was telling me, hey, this is getting me somewhere. Let me try one more time. I tried the next day. I woke up, and this time it feels like I found that doorknob. I found the doorknob to the door. I'm like, okay, this is very promising. There's something more I'm getting out of this. And again, this is for illustrative purposes. I'm describing it this way. Obviously, it didn't happen that same way, but that's the best way I can describe it. Eventually, the third, the fourth, or fifth morning, whichever morning it was, I did it again. I woke up, I said Vaheguru a few times, and that door that was closed, it suddenly opened. And Riji, when that door opened, there was just so much. This part is not illustrative purposes. It actually happened. Way when the door opened, there was just so much light, and I still remember that light. I remember like a screenshot of that light in my mind. When I think back to it, and there was just so much light that it was unbelievable of how it made you feel. It just made you feel loved. It made you feel cared for. It made you feel protected. It made you feel in all sorts of way healed, from anything that you might have felt before. It was a very caring, compassionate light. It was more than light. It was the feeling you get when you're with a person. But in visual experiences, it was a light. And when that light was taking place all around me, it was or in front of me, I just the only thing I was able to do was cry. I was only able that's the only physical reaction I had to that. I was crying, and I kept crying, but the crying wasn't from a place of pain. It was quite the opposite. It was from a place of feeling so loved, feeling so healed. And I remember my brain like trying to process what was going on, because in that moment I felt a separation. I felt a separation of who I am and who my brain is. And that moment the brain is talking, is like, what's going on? What is this? Like, why am I crying? And why am I feeling so good about crying? It's not the normal type of crying. It's like a totally different type. And from there on, Riji, my life's changed forever. And I just dived deeper and deeper. I wanted to explore what this was. So I had made a friend who moved into my house coincidentally around this time. He was a Amritari Gursik. And I spoke to him. I said, hey, I wanna do Simran in the morning with you guys, Do you guys do Simran in the morning? He said, yeah, we do. And he took me along, and eventually I was like, how do I learn more?
Mm.
He's like, hey, take Santhya, learn how to read Gurmukhi. And so then I enrolled in my local Gurmukhi classes. And that's kind of the start of the journey.
Wow. Thank you for explaining all of that. It's so beautiful, and I think for the viewers as well, it will open up so much, especially you were talking about the relationship with your parents and how there was a cultural difference, a generation difference, and and being able to have someone like Jagaraj Singh or even like yourself and speaking, and maybe people who are younger listening to this, being able to connect in that way, and then the importance of the meditation and that beautiful experience that you found. Um, yeah, thank you for sharing that. Um, I would love to. Um, I would love to go next into the Charitro. How did you start to? How did it come to you to want to share Charitro Pakyan series? And I think coupled with this, it'd be also be useful to know for the wider public, um, if they don't know what this is, how is this contextually placed? Um, Maybe a bit about your YouTube channel and how you're explaining there, and then also probably the purpose of Dasam Granth and Guru Granth Sahib as well, because for people who are not familiar, they might not be familiar with that context as well.
Sure, sure. And please feel to if I run over any steps, please just feel to interrupt and
Okay,
you can help me.
sure, sure.
Charitrophakhyan. How did I start the series? What is it? The role of Dasam Granth. Well, so that once I started my learning of Santhya from a local teacher here, I spent 2 years with that teacher. And eventually what happened was that that teacher passed me on to his teacher.
Hmm.
So my first teacher, he was quite old. He was a Bajorika, a respected elder. And when he passed me on to his teacher was a bit younger than him, like maybe like 5, 10 years younger than him. That I spent 7 years with that teacher, learning
Nice.
Santhya. And this was just learning the Gurmukhi script. Eventually I wanted to learn more. I wanted to learn the meanings of the script. It took me 7 with him, 2 with him, 9 years to just we recovered the whole of Guru Granth Sahib,
Hmm.
from start to finish, within the original Ladiwar script. Ladiwar script is when the script is joined together with no spaces. um,
Wow.
and after all that time, along the way and in the latter years for sure, I wanted to learn the meanings of the scripture. Right?
Hmm.
I wanted to learn all about it, and so I started to learn from different teachers. Different teachers had different specialties, they specialize in different things. So I learned how to read the script and then understand the script. And when that phase of understanding came, I learned that there's many languages in Guru Granth Sahib Ji. Like Guru Granth Sahib Ji is not just one language. There's multiple languages with multiple dialects that are involved. Take, for example, Punjabi. Punjabi is a language, but there's multiple dialects. There's Majhewali, there's Malwewali, there's Puadi, there's Duabe Wali, there's Lendi Punjabi. So there's so many different types of Punjabi. Some are dying out, especially within the Lendi Punjabi region. The smaller dialects are dying out, right? And that's just how language works. Language like it's a living breathing thing, what language is. The more users it has, the language grows. The less users it has, the language dies, because
Hmm.
as time develops, new things are being invented. New inventions call for new names, new terminologies, new vocabulary words. If the users are not involved in that process of invention, then they will never receive a name in their language. For example, I have here tissue papers.
Yeah.
Tissue papers, we call it tissue papers.
Hmm.
Now, how would a Punjabi person call this? Tissue paper.
Hmm.
How, why don't they have their own word for it? Because we never invented it. It was invented by someone else. So vocabulary, words, languages is a dynamic breeding process. It's So now the majority of the world is speaking English. Um, Therefore, we will always have, until there's no other language that beats English, the most vocabulary words will be in that language. Because as things are invented, they're gonna find the word in its English equivalent before they give it, any other name. Um, Anyways, so I started to learn all these different languages within Guru Granth Sahib Ji. I started learning Sanskrit. I started learning Farsi, Arabic, and to the degree of what it was applicable to me, right? Not to all of Arabic, not to all of Persian, but just to the bits and pieces that were in Guru Granth Sahib Ji, right? But that still gives you a lot of understanding about a language, right? Eventually, I learned about Braj, and that's quite of an important topic right there, and we're gonna come into that.
Okay.
Then I started learning Sikh history from a history teacher, who he started me off with pre-colonial texts, which were written in Braj, and Braj was quite of a popular language amongst Sikh poets. Just I guess because of its reach within India. I think Punjabi would have reached only a few individuals, Punjabis, whereas Braj would have been able to be more accessible with larger populations,
Okay.
right?
Is that like a Sanskrit Braj, or is that like a is that coming from Sanskrit? Is that a separate like public kind of language?
The family tree of Braj, I I think yeah, you can definitely find if you go up the tree line, and to be honest, I don't fully remember. I remember looking at the tree before. I just don't remember if Braj was separate, or I know Punjabi was separate from Sanskrit. I just don't know where Braj
Oh,
was on that family
right.
tree. But yeah, I would imagine maybe it does relate to Sanskrit. Some scholars have even said that Braj is more older than Sanskrit, where Sanskrit was a more of a formal academic
Oh,
language, where Braj was more of the people's language. And so it predates Sanskrit. Um, but yeah, that's all I
it's
can
all good.
share.
It was just a side question. Thank you.
So Braj was is quite popular, or was quite popular amongst Sikh scholars and Sikh historians, Sikh poets. And I think for the simple reason because it was much more accessible to the Indian people. And that was probably the audience, right, at that time. Um, Much like the audience of any academic person today, if he wants to reach a global audience, that person might write in English, right? So I think Braj was that kind of language. So naturally, within the history kind of classes I was taking, Braj was one of the foremost language we were learning. Eventually, my history teacher, he just one day brought up Charitrophakhyan. He said that he just looked me in the eye, and it was quite a mystical moment, to be honest, because it was quite unexpected. It was just out of the blue. We were walking to the Gurdwara, um, and he walks in front of me, and he's like, Supreet Singh, you'll never know the beauty, the bravery, and the high character of a woman until you reach Chitrbakyan. And that,
Mm.
that was it was the randomest thing. He said that and he walks away. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. I heard of Chitrbakyan before, and for anyone that doesn't know, it's one of the largest, actually, it is the largest composition within the Dasam Granth. The Dasam Granth is a text, a scripture attributed to Guru Gobind Singh, 10th Guru. Um, and it's the largest section, and it's also one of the most controversial sections because the nature, the theme of the text, that composition as a whole is all about trickery. It's about deception. Like you kind of started off the podcast by saying it's very worldly.
Mm.
It is very, it's very political. It's all about people deceiving other people, you know? It's these stories, these tales, whether they're mythological or historical, it doesn't really matter. The kind of the nature of the composition is it's classified as Kissa literature.
Mm.
Kissa literature in its own nature is just stories. Whether they're true or fake doesn't matter. It doesn't. That's not the merit of the conversation. The conversation is based off what is the teachings that these stories can give us. What are the
Mm.
morals that the stories can give us, and to play around with it basically. Um, so it is quite controversial within the Sikh community. This composition, it's just because of its nature. Sikhs have very well kind of navigated into a lifestyle that revolves around we are worldly people. That's what I think the guru intended for us to be, live in the world, but the mind to be kind of like a yogi.
Mm.
You're physically, you're doing all these different things. You have a job, you have a family, you have a career, you have kids, but in the mind you're so composed and grounded. You're filled with values and virtues like compassion and contentment. You're filled with these grounding and composure that a yogi would have, but you're living amongst the fire. That's kind of like what I see the guru's goal of a Sikh being, right? So within that lifestyle, we've done two things. The first thing was that we put spirituality in a different box than the world. We say that these two things are separate. You do your own thing in the house and the world, and you put religion and God and spirituality in a separate box. That's something you do on a Sunday. You know what I mean? That, and what that has done for us is that mentally we put these two things separately. So when the guru talks about these two things together,
Mm.
huge issue with that. We're like, whoa, that cannot be the guru. That cannot be the voice of the guru. The guru will never. The guru's in the Gurdwara on a Sunday. He doesn't exist in my house. He doesn't exist in my brain. He's not. But when you actually do open up Gurbani and the words of the guru, Gurbani means the words of the guru. When you do open up the words of the gurus, you will see that the guru never separated the two, and he's actually criticized, critiqued those that did separate the two. That was all of
Mm.
Gurbani. You can see that time in, time out again. The Guru criticizes those that put God in a building, that put God in a box, that put God in one form and left that God all alone just to visit at a certain time throughout the week. He's criticized that. He said, make God's house his body.
Mm.
Make the worshiper of God your soul. Like he went very deep to the point where you cannot separate God, faith from the world. He's put it together. Now, Chitrapakyan is all about how to navigate that world that's shaping its way around you, navigating that hostile world, because the world will have, multiple flavors. So it might be kind to you, but it might be nice to you. But there might be aspects of the world that might want to kill you. They might want to hurt you. They might want to destroy you. Um, Especially if you start building a name for yourself. And Chitrapakyan is all about that world
Mm.
that wants to destroy you, that world that wants to kill you, that world that wants to deceive you. And it's all about these political moral teachings that will be prescribed in a story. So Chitrapakyan is a collection of 405 stories. So it's a voluminous composition of collection of 405 stories, which are sewing together with an overarching story. So
Mm.
there's an overarching story, which I can go into if you like.
Sure. Maybe before we go into the stories itself, I'd also like to share, my journey in that, going through these podcast series, and also Guru Granth Sahib, trying to listen to the Shabads. It always felt a bit separate to me, like the trying to achieve like shunya, or like being away from Maya, and being a like a quote unquote good person. But then, like, how do I then, like, then I'm a bit naive in the sense that I don't believe that the world is out to get me. And then I think it was 2020, I came across a book by Robert Greene, and I can't remember the name now, but it was all talking about, it was like 48 laws of power. And I thought, this makes sense. But on the other hand, there's Gurbani, and I just happened to come across Charitrophakhyan in English, and it was quite a number of years ago, and I was like, oh, I'm so glad that there's this written by Guru Gobind Singh. I couldn't go into the level of depth you did, obviously, on my own, but I was like, okay, there's like the Miri and Piri, and Miri doesn't just mean like fighting with a sword, it also means that my intellect can be sharpened. And so I don't need to just be like kind of dumb. Sorry to use that word, but I don't need to be like that going about the world. I can actually like be a bit astute here, and I feel like that's what Guru Gobind Singh's trying to help us do, like as like sons almost or daughters, and that's how I kind of took it. Um, um, and I also just want to, before we dive in, we did also talk on the history of Dasam Granth and maybe why this wasn't put to the forefront of our tradition due to historical reasons and colonialization. But now that we do have this Gyan knowledge back, um, also the importance of culture, mythology, and how that shapes us. Because in the world today, we're in a very, I mean, I'm an engineer as well, we're in a very like logical driven society. We've kind of lost the mythos of the world, which I feel ties directly to creation itself. And by losing mythology, or yeah, mythological aspects, I feel like we also lose a sense how to relate to ourselves. So just also want to draw that context for viewers who are maybe a bit more logically minded. Um, and then maybe we can start with what context has Guru Gobind Singh written this first tale that travels through, because it's so beautiful how there's so many components, but that one tale goes through everything. So notice you wrote about poison, but also Amrit. So how can we know Amrit when we don't know poison? How can we know the peak of the mountain when we don't know the valley? That really struck me. So as we start to look at these stories, how has Guru Gobind Singh Ji formed these characters with his intellect? Maybe what does Chandi and the demons represent? Perhaps we can start from there, just to give some context for people who might not also be coming from a Sikh background.
Beautiful. Yes, absolutely. Mythology has been used by the gurus to shape the world around them. And that's the beauty of story, right? The beauty of a story is that if the story carries truth, and truth is what brings us closer to Vaheguru, right? Truth is what brings us to closer to God. If the story carries truth, you can change the characters, you can change the angles of the story, but the truth will bring the person home. That's kind of like the and and that's what mythology does. Mythology is quite different from history because history, okay, let's say the history of this morning that Supreet Singh woke up, had a bowl of cereal, right? It's a historical fact. Supreet Singh did wake up on January, whatever, and had a bowl of cereal. But there's not much truth in that historical event because it doesn't get anyone closer to it doesn't get anyone it doesn't do anything for anyone else. It's history. It
Hmm.
happened, but it doesn't really. But if I made up a story to say that, oh, Supreet Singh, there was a huge fire outside of his house. He grabbed his sword. He went outside and he saw the houses were burning. He went into each house, looked for a baby that was crying, brought the baby to his mom, and like, it shows now that story showed bravery, showed valor, it showed courage, it showed all these different human properties, these human values that are truthful. You know, and inspires now 100 people listening to that story to do something very similar when something like that happens in their lives.
Hmm.
So even though that might never have happened, I never went out, and that never happened in my life, right? But it had more a profound effect on the listener. And I think that's what mythology is meant to do. Um, I think when what the gurus did was they interacted with the local mythology around them. So Guru Gobind Singh Ji, his local mythology was different than what Guru Nanak Dev Ji's local mythology was. So that's something to note.
Okay, I didn't
Guru
know.
Gobind Singh Ji Maharaj, where they were demographically located was in the Shivalik Hills, a region of India, which is centered around the focus of Devi and Shiv. So it's like Shivism is quite popular there. Um, and so the guru interacted with his regional stories, regional mythologies, by using what they're most popularly known about, which is Chandi, Devi. It's a goddess, the goddess of war, and it's very popular in that region. So demographically, where in Guru Gobind Singh Ji was in Anandpur Sahib, Ponta Sahib, Patna Sahib, Kiritpur Sahib. These are all locations where Guru Gobind Singh Ji was located, and these are all part of the Shivalik Hills. So the goddess of war, known as Chandi, as Bhagoti, as Devi, Durga, these are all synonymous names. Guru Gobind Singh does a retelling of her story.
Mm.
I say a retelling because, well, the original stories are located in a text called the Bhagavad Puran. It's a text written in Sanskrit, and this text is very ancient, very old. It has multiple retellings of its own, but the original text, it's not the writings of Guru Gobind Singh are not a translation of those texts because a lot has been changed. It's just a retelling. And within the retelling, Guru Sahib repurposes the story of Chandi to fit his own needs.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how kind of Guru Gobind Singh Ji, interacts with this goddess of Chandi. It's all throughout the Dasam Granth. Another reason that the Dasam Granth has been, controversial in many ways, within the Sikh traditions because the heavy usage of Chandi, the heavy usage
Mm.
of Devi throughout the text. What people don't understand or haven't looked into is again the demographical location of the guru himself. If they just looked at that for a few minutes, it'll be very clear why the usage of Devi is so prominent within the Dasam Granth and not prominent, let's say, within Guru Granth Sahib Ji,
Mm.
because the audience of all the gurus were different. When Guru Nanak Dev travels to Mecca, his audience are a Muslim crowd, right? Now he's got to be talking in their language, talking with their cultural background, talking with, kind of like how I started off my own journey, saying that my parents were from a different background than I was, and therefore there was a disconnect. The gurus were social engineers. And I say they were social engineers because they recognize their social society, they recognize their social audience, they recognize their backgrounds, they recognize their languages, they recognize who they are as a person on a fundamental human level. And they use their background to teach them about the truth of life. And that's what Guru Gobind Singh was doing with Dasam Granth. Dasam Granths, because yes, the audience was primarily
Right.
in the Shivalik hills, right? So the references that the Guru used time in and time out again were Devi.
Mm-hmm.
So most of all the compositions of Guru Gobind Singh Ji, there are a couple of them within the Dasam Granth. They all have some reference to the goddess of war,
Mm.
and it was very suiting for the Guru because the Guru was engaged in a war. He was engaged in a war with tyrants, with people who were exploiting the innocent, the Mughal regime, the hill chiefs, these regimes were exploiting the innocent people, and the Guru were standing up for the innocent, right? They were standing up for the low and the downtrodden. So the goddess of war was very suiting and very fitting to their needs at that time.
Amazing. And yes, very nice as you explained it was suited to that location. And uh, correct me if I'm wrong, but um, when I was looking, what I resonated with when they were mentioning these aspects was, like you said, Bhagoti was like archetypes. So when they're mentioning like the Devi or Bhagoti, it's like this, it's the Shakti or the energy within us, the ability to destroy our inner demons as well. So I feel like back then, like if you would say like our language may be a bit more scientific in that you'd say like our energy to destroy certain parts psychologically, but like back then maybe like mythology resonated more. Is am I right in saying that?
Yes, I think it would be. I think I feel the same way. Yes, I agree.
Okay, because and that's one of the reasons that I think mythology has been um, like sadly I think not used so much in society in that because they have like different archetypes in mythology. It kind of makes us more close to the nature of reality. Whereas sometimes when we don't have these stories or archetypical stories, um, maybe actually certain other narratives can take hold if we are not embedded in these more like primal archetypical narratives. So I was wondering if you could also, yeah, before we get into the first, I think you were going to explain to us actually like how Guru Gobind Singh composed it. But before we actually go into that, how can we overcome the shame, the taboo, and uncomfortability as we start to deal with these stories? What sort of mindset does one have to cultivate or approach and have a degree of respect and, I guess, honor before um, coming into contact with these writings?
Very good. Beautiful question. I think it's a very similar attitude we have when we take, for example, sex education class. You know, if we start giggling and laughing around, the teacher's gonna be like, "Are you a kid? Are you 5 years old? You can't handle this information on the board. You can't handle the image I'm showing you of how, you know, the inner cells and blood works, you know,
Mm-hmm.
of a woman and of a man. Like, we're gonna be like the teacher will pull us out of the class like you're a kid, you know. And I think that's the same attitude we need to have when we're coming into the guru's darbar. If we're coming to learn from the guru, and we're very lucky to be able to learn from the guru in the first place. We have the guru's own writings. Like, how many other traditions and cultures and religions can say that they have their leaders, prophets own writings like that? That's not, it's not very easy to preserve, right? And with Maharaj's grace, we've been able to preserve that for over 500 years. So I think when we're coming into the Guru's Darbar to learn, we should come with this, like you said, with this respect that, you know, we're going to be taught something, and this attitude of being an adult. You know, you're coming to the Guru's Darbar, you're going to learn about, you know, whatever the Guru wants to teach you. Be an adult, be a student, you know. Don't be someone that's causing mischief. Don't be the person sitting in the last row laughing, giggling with their friends. Don't be that person, because you're not gonna walk out with an A. You're gonna walk out with an F, you know, and you're gonna have to come back next semester and try all again.
Cool. So, with that being said, yeah, and I think it's important, especially as like we are, of course, living in the real world. So it's important to have a sharp discernment and also not be naive, I guess. Um, and so, how did Guru Gobind Singh start to cultivate this first story? Perhaps you can tell us a bit about the king and the son and what they represent and how the thinking was to um, teach morals through these type of characters, because we might not have kings nowadays, we might have managers, or we might have um, I don't know, like other, we do have presidents and prime ministers, right, as well, but I guess our hierarchies are the same, but the labels are just different. So if you could help us shed some light on this too.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah, sometimes I 100% agree with that. Like, the political ideology of the world might have changed, right? We're living in a republic. Most of us are living in republics, and then an imperial system or a monarchy. But then the day, the point is the same. They're, you know, big people ruling over small people, you know, and how they rule over us, you know, means a lot, right? Are they ruling justly through righteousness? Through compassion, or are they ruling to exploit others? Are they ruling with self-interest, right? And that never changes. People will always be people, whether it's a king or it's a president or it's a prime minister. People will always be people. Good people will always be good, bad people will always be bad, right? And the guru, he starts off this. this composition, and let me kind of break down the word first, the name of the composition. So the
Oh,
name of the
yes.
composition is Chitropakyan. Charitra means a tale. It means a few different things. It means a tale. It means a play in the context of deceiving someone. Like when let's say we backstab someone, we say, "Yo, you played me." Like this in New
Mm.
York, we would say that, man, you played me, man. Like it's like he robbed me or he got my back somehow, right? It's so charitra means to play, like it's to create a play in that context, in that conjutation of deceiving someone. It means a tale, a story. Pakyan means to explain. Pakyan means to speak, you know. So Chitrapakyan literally means, you know, a story, a play, a deception. That's what it kind of means. Huh? And there's 405 Charitras, there's 405 tales.
Mm.
The very first tale is about the goddess of war, Durga. So it's kind of opened up as a homage to the power. And again, the way when the guru does invoke the Devi, the goddess of war, he's again, because I did say that the guru repurposes stories, right? He repurposes and redefines different things. So he's redefining Chandi to be the sword, and you'll see that time and time out again. He redefines the word Chandi to being the actual sword, sword of righteousness, so it's more symbolically used for his own purpose of fighting a war, fighting a righteous war. Taramyud is called.
Mm.
So he opens up with that, and then he goes into the overarching story. The overarching story is going to be the tale which links all the other tales together. And this story is about a king. His name is Charitra Singh. So it's like you'll see the terminology used in that Charitra itself. Everything's about Charitra. So the city is called Charitra Nagari, the city of Charitras. The king is called Charitra Singh. Um, what else? There's so many like ironical little funny things used in that story itself. So there's a king. He's married to a woman. What happens is that the woman that he's married to, one day she gets kidnapped or something happens where she's no longer in the picture, right? So I think she gets kidnapped or she disappears. Oh, I remember. Sorry, it's been such a long time.
It's
The
okay.
woman that he marries in that story was a angelical being. So he's married to an angelical being, and he's getting older while the angel, or the fairy, she's not, right? um and so over time, as the king gets older, the fairy thinks that it's time for me to leave. Like I can't stay with this guy anymore. He's getting too old. So she flies away, she disappears. And the king thinks that my wife has been kidnapped. My wife has been taken away from me. So he sends his spies out to look for his wife. Eventually, one spy, one informant comes back and he says, "Look, king, I think I saw your wife. She's in this city. She's in Fana city, right? I think it was Orissa or something." And the king is like, "Oh wow, you found my wife. Great. Let's do a large scale attack on this city, and take back my wife." So he does a large scale attack on this city of Odisha, and he kills the king of that area, and he brings home this woman, right? Who obviously was not his wife, because his wife was a fairy and she already flew away. This is a normal human being that he brought home, right? She's much younger than him. She just lost her husband. Now she's with this random guy, right? So he brings her home, and she's not happy. Obviously, she's not happy, right? The Raja has a son. So Raja Tritra Singh has a son. His son's name is Hanuman Singh. Hanuman Singh is tasked with this duty of taking care of his mom, right? Which is not really his mom. And so as he's taking care of her, one day she's like, "Look, I don't like your father. Like this is totally wrong. Like you brought me over here. Like you took me away from my own home, and you brought me here. I don't want this."
Mm.
He said that you and me are more alike. We are the same age category. I'm your age. Like, this makes no sense for me to be with your father, who's like old and about to die, I'd rather be with you.
Mm.
On the one saying is now in a moral dilemma. On one side, morally, this woman is meant to be his mom,
Mm.
even though he probably realizes this is not his mom, but he's because she's married to his dad, she's a mom, right? Like a mom figure. But he also knows that, look, if what she's saying, if true, if it is the truth, which I think he does know it is the truth, then she's right. She doesn't belong with him. She belongs with someone like me, like someone like my age, right? But his conscious is focusing on the dharam of the duties between a son and a mom. So
Mm.
he says, look, I don't know what you're saying, but I do know that technically you are my mom. And because you are my mom, there's no way I can think of a relationship in that sort. It's like I can't think of being with you because technically on paper you're my mom. She says that, look, this is what I want and this is what I'm gonna need to do. So I want you to elope with me. And if you don't, I will accuse you of raping me. Yeah.
Mm.
So he says, look, I'm bounded to my dharam. I'm bounded to my duty. My duty provided to my by my dad is to take care of you and see you as my mom, and that's all I'm gonna do. So she said, fine. She rips a bit of her clothes, makes a little bit of scratches on her. She walks outside, goes to the king, says, look, your son tried to rape me.
Mm.
The king, being naive, being ignorant, and being unemotionally intelligent, right away makes the decision to execute his own son. He tells his people in the room, execute my son. This is it. He's over, right? The advisors, every king has advisors, right? Even today, presidents have advisors, prime ministers have advisors. The advisors come up and they're like, whoa, hold up there. You might be making a mistake. And the advisors, being more wiser than the king, they recognize that there's some trickery being played. And so what they do is they say, look, let us teach you why and how you might be making a mistake by telling you a story.
Mm.
And what comes is a series of stories, 405 to be exact, of teachings and lessons for that king, Raja Charitra Singh, to understand that decision he's making is clearly irresponsible. And stories show deception, and they show how people deceive other people. And they're both deceptions played by males and females. It's not just gender specific, um, although a majority of them are female deceptions, one can say. But I don't think it's gender specific. I think it's just people deceiving other people. And at the end of the day, that's what it is. And within there, there's quite
Mm.
explicit stories, in the sense that they're very illustrative of sexual scenes, adultery, exploitation, the killing of children. Like there's a lot of horrible and horrible things that people have done that are written in these stories. And so that's where the controversy, stems from. Like people are like, wait, how could the guru have been engaging in these type of, stories? Like, so that's kind of where, again, because people separate the two, right? They put the guru in one box, real life in another box. They don't put it together. Where the guru always operated in a state of, in that state where everything is together.
Amazing. And it's just like you switch on the news and it's like these things are happening right now. And it's like, well, how do we solve these problems? How do we navigate with these problems? And it's like, well, we've got 405 Charitras there. And it's really beautiful um, how you explained that. And I was just wondering for the audience, you explained really nicely. I think it was one of the videos about the Buddh, the Chit, um, yeah, it was parts of us subconsciously, like part of us could be the king, part of us could be the sun. Um, could you maybe explain how our intellects or subconscious or thoughts arise for viewers who are maybe wanting to understand how their own intellect and thoughts also arise and how they can relate to these stories as well?
Sure, absolutely. And
Thank you.
just a disclaimer, it's not going to be the end all be all when it comes to conversations on the consciousness, the human consciousness, and the intellect. And there's so many different types of ways to understand what it is. I don't think anyone has the only answer. But this example in Pacific that Ridge you're referencing is more of a, I think, an Indic understanding of what the human conscious is. And the way I was explaining is that within the Indic understanding, there's four different parts of the human autonomy, this with the soul. And those four things are the Man, the Buddh, the Chit, and the Ahankar. Um, and they kind of go from subtle to more and more physical, these things. So the man is described as the very subtle part of who you are, where there is just thoughts with no sense of direction, thoughts with no sense of purpose. They're just thoughts, they're just there. The next part of that is the chit. The chit is this part of you which kind of looks at a thought and starts to analyze a thought. It starts to produce a question like, what do I do with this thought, right? Do I go on and push this to the next category, or do I just throw it back down into that thought bubble again, into that void of just thoughts again, right? What do I do with this thought? And the next step after chit is the buddhi. The buddhi is your intellect. That that part of you which makes an active decision. So the man is just this void of thoughts that have no purpose. They're just thoughts. The chit it can zoom into a thought, pick it up, and start to analyze it. The buddhi is then what makes a decision of that thought. And then the last bit is the hankar, which is the physical manifestation of that original thought. So, for example, I have a thought to pick this memory card up, right? That's my thought. My thought is to pick this up. The chit starts to examine that thought. Should I or should I not pick it up? The buddhi, according to what I've understood about life and technology and memory cards in general, it says, and what I have to do right now, it says I have to pick up this because I need it to put into my computer. Then it pushes it onto Hankar. Hankar is the physical manifestation. I pick it up with my right hand and put it in my computer. Yeah.
Mm,
So how a thought becomes a physical manifestation.
amazing.
What I what I was doing with that understanding and to kind of explain what I did with that analogy in the context of Chitropakhyan, I need to just walk towards a little bit more towards Chitropakhyan's format. So after all those stories, Chitropakhyan ends with a very famous composition that we all read, morning to nighttime, by Guru Gobind Singh Ji, which is called Kabio Baj Benti Chaupai. Hamri Karo Hat Hai Racha Puran Hoy. And this very famous composition, it's like a 4 minute, 5 minute recitation. It'll take you that long to recite this composition. And it's a composition on protection. It's a composition on asking for protection from the divine. It's a composition of asking protection from the creator, from Vaheguru, that please protect me with your own hands. May my mind always be at your feet. So it's crazy that after all these stories, so dark, so explicit, after going through all of that, a Sikh comes down to the Guru's charan and says, Maharaj, I am nothing. I cannot fight these things that are gonna happen all around me. You're the only one that can protect me. You're the only one that can save me. And it's quite when you hear it in that context of how it starts, it starts with a sword, and the person holding the sword is this female woman, right? It's kind of showing that bravery can be within a person that that the world doesn't think of as brave. The world doesn't look at a woman as being brave, right? I
Mm,
mean, today we do, but we don't realize that's a very new thing. We go back 60 years. You know, in many countries, women did not have the right to vote. You know, in the United States of America, we women were only allowed to vote maybe in the 1900s. We'll fact check that in a bit, but I do think that it's a very recent phenomena to see to see the that gender in the light we see today. It wasn't always in that same way. So it's very cool to see that the Guru starts off these collection of stories of deceptions, which will have again, one might say the majority of these deceptions are played by women, but it all starts with a woman as well. It starts with a woman carrying a sword on the battlefield.
Mm,
It starts with the highest image of who a woman can be, who a person can be. You can take the genders off and look at it from a human level. Who a person can be. A person can be this brave warrior on the battlefield of truth. This brave person who will fight towards no end, you know, to make sure that the world is a safer and better place, right? And that can be the application of that can be so in so many different ways. The war against drugs, the war against human trafficking, the war against it doesn't again that imagery is meant to be what you're meant to extract from that imagery is the human values, you know,
mm,
which can be applied in so many different scenarios. And, and so then you end off with you go through all these stories and you end off in a place of prayer. You end off in a place of seeking protection, seeking it's you end up in a state of humility, right? It's such a beautiful thing that the composition does. And within that, the example I was giving of the mind, the body, the man, the Buddha, Chit, Ahankar, all
mm,
these type of functions that we compose within that, the mind that produces these thoughts, you know, is ignorant, it's naive, it doesn't know what the thoughts are not. The chit itself is also naive, it's also very ignorant, but it's a little bit step above the man. It kind of has this function of 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 asking a question. That's the next step. You can be naive, that's fine, but at least know how to ask a question. What is
mm,
right and what is wrong? What is the truth of life? What is the falsehood? What is the falsehood of life? Like asking a question, that's the next stage. The third stage is the intellect. It's a stage where you learn. You learn how to make a decision. You learn all these different things of life, the good and the bad. You learn all these different things. You learn how humans have interacted in the past so that you can make an educated decision of the future. And that's your fourth stage, a physical manifestation of that original thought, the
mm.
physical action. You are meant to become a king. You're meant to become a king. You're meant to rule the world. You know, the Gurbani always says that the spiritual people rule the world. You know, the word of the Khalsa, like we say, Raj ka Khalsa. The Khalsa will rule the world. The word Khalsa means pure. The pure ones will rule the world. You know, and how do we become pure? It's a step-by-step process. Originally we were very naive, and you will see many characters in Charitrophakhyan are shown to be naive.
Mm.
They're shown to be very like, oh, my husband can never do anything wrong to me. My wife could never do anything wrong to me. My this and that could never, because there's this layer of emotional attachment involved.
Oh,
Being naive, the guru shows the story. Look, this is what happened to this naive person. So it's all about a transformation from going from here to end off here.
that's so beautifully explained. And when you talked about the first layer, the first aspect, the one that has the thoughts in the first place and it doesn't realize the thoughts it's having. You mentioned meditation at the start and maybe going to that level. So, during the meditation practice or Nam Simran, how can one begin to be in contact with that first layer? And also, at what stage do thoughts come in and sort of like take over that individual to then co- commit an act that is not righteous, if that makes sense? I think that would be really helpful for the viewers.
Very good question. Look, there's two there's like two parts to us. There is this logical side, and I know you touched upon that a little bit, little while ago. There's this logical side, right? The logical side thinks, it analyzes, it critiques. It's which is it's an important part of who we are. It should not be disregarded. But then there's this intuitional side as well. Intuitional side is all about intuition, your gut feeling. It cannot be explained, it cannot be deciphered, it cannot be analyzed. It is on its own side. If you are in the logical world, your intuition is very small, it's almost non-existent. When you're in
Mm.
the intuitional world, your logical side is very small and not almost not existent. Both of these two things, it's very hard for them to exist in harmony. That's what I've kind of seen. It's very hard for both things to be active at the same time. And that's kind of what happens in meditation. In meditation, you're going from the logical to the intuition. You're, and again, this is not the end all or be all way to explain it. I may be wrong in here, this is something we're all learning about this, right? As life goes on. And this is the best way I've kind of come to understand it right now. And it makes sense to me now. It
Mm.
might not make sense 10 years later. So
Of course.
forgive me. Um, but when we start meditating, we start Nam Simran, we start doing Bani, our mind is at first logical. Like I was saying that when I was doing Simran for the first time or a few days into it, when I started crying, my brain was still talking. It was like, what is going on? What's happening? It could not understand the experience that was taking place. And that I would say coming from a place of intuition.
Mm.
It was. But but that intuition was so much more rewarding, so much more enjoyable than my logical brain in that moment. I wanted nothing more than to merge with that intuition. I wanted nothing more to merge with that experience. I didn't want to care. I didn't care about why I was crying. That was fine if I didn't get the answer. It was much more enjoyable to just experience. So I think that's kind of how I look at Simran Nambani. I look at it as this way of me kind of mellowing down my logical mind, mellowing down my thoughts, and all those things. Just kind of mellow it down and start to feel and enjoy that feeling and dive into that feeling 100%. And then when I'm in the real world, when I'm not meditating, when I'm not, and I think life should become meditation. So
Mm.
how do I make life a meditation? And then what I do is now I have to be fully logical. Like I'm talking to you, I can't just sit here and smile. Like,
I could do
hey,
that.
baby, I'm sorry. I'm just enjoying. Like I can't. I have to talk. I have to think. Right. I have to process. I have to remember. Otherwise people will be like, kuch pata hi nahi, why is he
Yeah.
doing this? Like, so I have to be logical
Right.
95%, but I can't let go of my intuition because my intuition is what's grounding me. It's what's compelling me.
Mm.
It's what's keeping me afloat in the world of what's true and what's not true. It's what's giving me that discernment. It's what's giving me that wisdom. When people talk from their intuition, they will talk magical things that cannot be comprehended or cannot be spoken from a logical brain. When a singer, when someone's singing a song, they go into their intuition. That's it. That's when music is made. Music's not made before that. If someone's just reciting a song they remembered, they memorized from their logical brain, they're not feeling it,
Mm.
you know, the people that are listening are gonna walk away with just that much. Few words, a few tunes, instruments, people moving their mouth. That's it. But when a singer goes past their logical mind and goes into a place of intuition, they go into their heart and they sing from that spot. They might get the words wrong, but the people that are listening will have such an enjoyable time. They'll walk away like they were flying in the clouds. And there's a story. If I have just 1 minute to share that story of a Sikh of Guru Har Gobind Ji. She was cleaning up the darbar one night, and she was reciting Gurbani. And when she was reciting Gurbani, in the minds of the Sikhs listening to her, she was reciting it incorrectly.
mm,
So the line she was saying was Hon papi tu bakshinhar. But she was saying Tu papi home pakshinhar. So the original line means that I'm a sinner, I make mistakes. You are my savior, you are my forgiver. But the way she was saying it was the quite opposite. She was saying that you're the sinner to the guru, talking to the guru, and I'm your forgiver. And but she wasn't speaking from the logical brain. She wasn't speaking from her, she was speaking from her intuition. She was
mm.
speaking from her heart. And because she was speaking from her heart, the Sikhs that were listening, they could understand. They were thinking from their brains. They came out, they went to Guru Har Gobind Ji. They said, Maharaj, your Sikh is committing blasphemy. She is committing bedabhi, right? She need like you need to put an end to this. She's saying everything wrong. Guru Har Gobind Ji came and she said that this is the first time a Sikh recited Gurbani correctly. And the Sikhs were like confused. They're like, she's saying it wrong. We know the right pronunciation, the right verse, the right Gurbani quote. She's saying it completely wrong. And the Guru, on the other hand, was saying, no, quite the contradictory. She's actually saying it correct, and she's the first person that's spoken it correctly. You all are speaking it wrong. And why was that? Because she was speaking from the heart.
Wow. I mean, and I think the way you explained that, it's very helpful because, in like of course in daily life when we're going about, sometimes we can be so reactionary, or I know for myself, just very even defensive or offensive, and that's on the mind. But I think the way you explained it is something we're not often taught. Is how the thoughts arise, and then how we can be more discerning. Um, and so I think just going back to that question, why might certain thoughts come up, um, and then pass through that filter and overtake us? Is it simply that that aspect of creation inside of us is not conscious enough, um, and then it acts through us? And how can we start to be more sensitive to, um, these cultivating these positive values versus, because it can be quite subtle, versus like Kam, Krodh, Lo, Mohankar, immoral, deception, trickery, corruption. Because I feel like when we recognize that in ourselves, we can also start to recognize in the outside world, because they're effectively the same energies at play. So how do we, from your understanding of Charitrophakhyan, how, where does that start to arise from, like that dullness, and then how can we start to be more sensitive to these, playing? Because it seems like these energies play throughout all of the stories.
Yes, they do. They do. In that example I gave of the Mann, Chit, Buddha, Ahankar,
Mm-hmm.
therefore, the Buddhi is the gate before a thought becomes reality. The Buddhi is that gate. If it passes through the Buddhi, the thought passes through the Buddhi, then that thought will manifest into a physical action and it will become the real world, right?
Okay.
If it if it doesn't, the Buddhi does not allow it through, the intellect does not allow it through, then a thought will just remain a thought. It will go
Mm.
back down to the void where it came from, and no one will ever know it happened. When the buddhi is weak, when the intellect is weak, when we don't have enough willpower, when we don't have enough strength and courage to fight off our inner demons, then those wrong thoughts, thoughts I'm calling wrong, right? They
Mm.
thoughts are detrimental to your spiritual being. They will manifest and become true.
Mm.
Why do those thoughts exist in the first place? Well, that's just part of the game, I think, really. I don't know if anyone has an answer to that. It's like kind of like what came first, the chicken or egg? I don't know if anyone has the answer to why are bad thoughts there in the first place. I think that's it's just part of the game, and I think it's kind of like and the game is for you to figure out what is the truth, what is good for me, what is and what is not. And that's where discernment comes in. Discernment comes into that intellect part. It's the gate,
Hmm.
the gate before it becomes reality. And that gate is grown stronger through the guru's wisdom. That gate is grown stronger through willpower. And how's willpower made? Through fighting off your your bad habits. It's, for example, let's say someone is addicted to watching pornography. They're addicted to watching pornography. Now it's become a addiction. At first it probably started off as a thought, right? In their mind, maybe someone put it in their mind, like, hey, dude, check this out, whatever, right? As kids, we go through school and we hear all these different things, and we're interested, we're curious, we look it up, and we get enticed, and now it's become a habit. Now it's become a habit. Well, what do I do? Because now when my willpower is this small, and the habit is this strong, right?
Hmm.
The human brain, the human body, the human autonomy, how does that work? The spiritual autonomy, how does it work? It can refresh. It can refresh very easily. For example, would you look at a chain smoker? A chain smoker, someone smoking every single day, right? You look at the statistics of someone that stops smoking for 7 days and compare it with another chain smoker who has still been smoking, right? One chain smoker stopped for 7 days, the other chain smoker is still smoking. The lungs will automatically start to heal itself. They'll look different. That chain smoker, if he stops for 40 days, that's it. He's a cured person. Like his lungs will be 50% better. The chance of dying from a heart attack will be 60% compared to someone who didn't. So that means we are people that can heal. Like, and every time we get a cut, that the cut heals. It symbolizes everything in nature symbolizes that something that's made a mistake today, you have tomorrow to fix it.
Hmm.
It's not like that. Say you're going to hell. You did this mistake. You're going to hell. No, you have tomorrow to fix it. You have tomorrow, but tomorrow's not guaranteed.
Hmm.
If it comes to you, take it as a blessing and start over. So the same thing for that example I was giving for someone who's addicted to pornography. The next day comes, right? The habit is calling out. The habit is pushing you. Those thoughts, they're now becoming intrusive thoughts. They're flowing through those gates of buddhi. They're no longer asking for your permission now because it's become a habit. Your willpower is too strong, too small. They're flowing through. But in that moment, if you can just get up as much as you can, put that thought back in its place. One day, you put that thought back in its place. Second day, you get stronger. Then you put it back on the third place, you get even stronger.
Hmm.
Fourth day, you get in 40 days, you'll be completely brand new. You'll be so strong that that thing can never stand up again. Eh, And it will stay that way unless you let it again pass through the buddhi. You let it pass through the buddhi once, that's it, it's a slippery slope. You'll go back to the situation you started off with.
Amazing. And I think that's so, like we said at the start about taboo, about shame. I think it's so important, especially for young men at the present, who that takes a lot of life force energy out from them as well, in terms of willpower and being productive and being able to better themselves. Um,
Yes.
in terms of like, yeah, there could be eating like unhealthy food that requires willpower to overcome, and then lustful or like even power, wanting a lot of power. There's so many different levels, and I think it's just so powerful the way you explained that empowers people. And one thing that comes to my mind is people might be suppressing certain thoughts or feelings, and that's a bit different from being conscious and noticing. Correct me if I'm wrong, because it kind of can be two different things here when we're fighting a battle about how we're relating to these thoughts and emotions.
Yes, yes, I agree. I think suppressing thought is also not exactly the same way as defeating the thought, you
Okay,
know?
okay.
You're still wasting your energy on it. It's kind of like your body. Like let's say you have a bump on your body, right? Now your body is spending a lot of time trying to heal that bump. So a lot of energy is being diverted there, and so let's say you're because of that you might get more tired Might
Mm-hmm.
you might feel more hungrier because it's the same way how your mind works. If your mind is trying to patch up and put a bandage on a leaky faucet, right? It's gonna take away time and energy from your mind to do other things. So the way forward is it's probably easier described in an analogy than in any probably any other way. The way forward from the situation is to unplug the faucet. So for example, let me give you an example. So let's say you have a water hose, right? You have a water hose, and the water hose is clogged from the front. Um, but you poke a few holes in it, and it's the water is coming out of those holes. Now, what I can do is I can, my water is exerted through those holes, those five holes, yeah? And it's coming out. It's kind of like hurting me because the way it's coming out, it's like restrictive, like it's very small hole. My water needs to come out fully, but it's coming out from those. What I can try to do is patch up those holes, right? But that's not the best option because my front is patched as well, and the energy needs to go somewhere. That's another thing we're talking about. You just touched about man health, and that's a very important subject. I hope maybe one day we can have that conversation, or maybe you can bring on someone that can. It's really important because you, as a male, and maybe as a female as well. I don't know. I'm not. I just know about myself. So that's why I feel we have all this energy in us, right? And the energy needs to go somewhere. Like you said, it might go towards anger, it might go towards lust. It needs to go through. So it's going somewhere. Those five holes that you poked. But the solution is not to patch it up because the energy needs to go somewhere. The solution is to unclog the front.
Mm-hmm.
You unclog the front of the hose, the water will naturally come out the right way and it will stop coming out from those five holes that are on top. If you can divert your energy, you unclog your, how do you unclog that hose? Self-reflection. You sit down, you self-reflect. You look through all your trauma, you look through all your hurt, you look through all your pains, you look through all your suffering. You have to examine each and everything that you have inside your baggage, the baggage that we carry, the memory code. You go through all that human memory code, and you search and you search and you search and you comb and you comb and you comb, and then you heal and you heal and you heal. When you do all of that process, the water will naturally start coming out from the front of the hose. And when it starts coming out from the front of the hose, life will change. It will change drastically.
Really beautiful. As we slowly begin to wrap up, if you could also let the viewers know about the importance of, given what we discussed, just in terms of our relationship, so a spouse, or communities, and understanding these stories, of course, avoiding this and not being naive in the outside world, but also building, I think you mentioned this as well, a form of trust with our own spouse and our communities as well, because I think it also works to form trust in that way. Um, and so we can become more familiar with that healthy way of uh, being a human in this life.
Beautiful. Absolutely very true. I think, for the most part, when we're talking about Chitrapakhyan, like I mentioned, the overarching stories is this Raja who's being advised, right? And there's so much you can take away from that. You can take away understanding of how a husband is meant to treat his wife. And there is like literal teachings towards that concept and where Guru Gobind Singh Ji, he describes himself. This is a very, very important part of Purpose. I think it's one of the most important parts. Guru Gobind Singh Ji describes himself as a 9-year-old. And he says that one day my dad gave me a teaching. My dad came to me, Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji came to me and gave me a teaching at the age of 9. And it is fundamentally, it teaches me so much about everything. He said that my dad told me that you may you're meant to have a loving relationship with your wife. You're meant to have love between you and your wife, and you're meant to increase that love every single day. Let it multiply every single day. This is who you're meant to be. This is the husband you're meant to be, a loving one. But never, even in your dreams, my son, enter the bed of another woman. even in your dreams. The type of husband we want to be, the type of spouse we want to be, is one that is mentally prepared to stand at that door. Again, Vivek Buddhi, that discerning intellect, stand at that door and never let any thought that wants to deceive your spouse, that wants to deceive you, even if you're not married, you know, those thoughts there that are asking to get through, they're those thoughts that are, if you want to watch pornography, that want to watch the opposite gender, that want to, commit adultery, that want to cheat, that want to, those thoughts should be stopped right away. They're not meant to go through, because if they go through, they will hurt you, your relationships, and your life. That's what's going to end up happening. And the guru said, like, at the age of 9 I was taught this. Yeah. And that tells me a lot. Like, what are we teaching our kids at the age of 9? We're we're very like, it's a taboo subject for us to even go into that route. And the guru is talking about it. Imagine that culture 300 years ago that he's talking about it. That's crazy, Maybe they're more progressive than we are,
Yeah. And it's that form of, like you mentioned, the Vivek Buddhi, and it's just how clear, concise Guru Gobind Singh was. It speaks volumes about the civilization we've come from, and how they're able just to speak in a very open sense, and the kids at a young age are able to know about that, and not necessarily bad or good, but just how we can be more clear there. So I want to thank you for also, because it's also, it takes a lot to talk in these topics and also give some clarity there in the way that you've done. So thank you, and I really appreciate your time today. Is there any last things you'd like to also share with the community, with the Sangat, on what we discussed, that comes to mind?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me on. And I think I would definitely love to share a few um, you know, platforms where, the viewers can find the series.
Yes.
Uh, we're on Instagram. It's called Stories of Deception. That's our account handle. You can find us there. We're on YouTube. That's where you're gonna find the full analysis of Charitrophakhyan. It will be on our YouTube channel called E13 Exploring Sikhi. When you go into that channel, you'll see a playlist called Charitrophakhyan, Demystifying Charitrophakhyan, or the Chaturpikyan series. You can go there and you'll find the series there. And yeah, I love diving into these stories. I love sharing it with the viewers. So I hope everyone enjoys it as much as I do. And we just recently, we were able to get an editor just quite recently, and he's been very kind. His name is Anup Singh. He's been going through all the previous episodes that I recorded about a year and a half ago. So those are almost done, the old recordings, and now new recordings are being made as we speak. So those new ones are gonna be coming out in a few weeks. So I'm very excited to share all that with you guys, and yeah, and I'm looking forward to your comments as well. A lot of people do comment, and it's so surprising, Richie, to see the comments. They're filled with so much love and gratitude for the series. That's been one of the most rewarding things for me. When I see those comments, I'm blown away. I'm here waiting for a retaliation, waiting for people to just be like, "What is that? What's going on?" Get my language. But that's what I kind of was waiting for. But till day 3G, I probably only received one negative comment out of 50, 60 comments I've read.
Hmm.
You know, uh, and so that really shows that the community was waiting for this, and I'm very happy to been given that service.
Yeah, thank you for the savor that you're doing, and yeah, I think the community is resonating with it, and especially I do. I've learned a lot from it, and yeah, and the editor or editing brings it to life a lot more, and everything as well. So thank you. I'll also put everything in the links in the description below. I think your Instagram as well is your name, and also stories at or stories of deception if people want to reach out to you.
Yes, my personal Instagram is Bhai Supreet Singh. Yeah,
Okay,
you can find me there as well.
fantastic. I'll put everything there. Okay, thank you again, Bhai Supreet Singh. ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ